Today, we're forecasting the future for Bitcoin and the stock markets. We're reviewing what happened in the last 6 months, looking forward to the next 6 months, and then out towards the end of the cycle. We're looking at the peak for Bitcoin, the peak for the stock markets, and the peak for the real estate cycle. It's going to be a massive video, so make sure you hit the like button if you enjoy this content and finding value from it, of course, and subscribe to the channel if you are new here. About 3 out of 10 haven't subscribed yet, and this content builds upon each of the previous day, week, month, and year. We've been around for a long time here to home a macro cycle analysis. Heaps to get through with you today, along with looking back at some of these forecasts that I've put together over the years. But more importantly, how can we use them moving forward and hopefully make some profits along the way? I've got a few interesting facts here as I went through my analysis this morning, just to make things a little bit more interesting for myself and hopefully for you as well, listening, watching at home or in the car. Interesting Bitcoin and stock market cycle facts. This is for the end of June. We're at the end of June, so 6 months into 2025 already. Crazy how fast it's gone. And basically, we're going to look at the end of the month, end of the week as well, because that's on Monday today, end of the month in 24 hours, end of the quarter, end of the 6 monthly candles or bars. And I'm also going to look at a little bit on the 12 months. So basically the annual bars, the yearly bars as well. Lots has gone on this month. Some massive, massive records. Some of the largest ranges that we have ever seen in history on the stock market. We'll get to that in a moment. Number one, Bitcoin has never seen 4 straight green years. So as I showed in the intro, we're into our third, well, potentially green year. If Bitcoin closes the end of this year above $93,455, then we'll get a green year. So this thing could shoot to any of those ridiculous price targets of $500,000 or even $1 million this year. And as long as it closes above 93 grand, all the way up, all the way back down, if it's above 93,000 and a half, we're going to be green. So that would be 3 years. But like you can see over these previous cycles, it's never done 4. Now, I don't include this one back here. This was basically Genesis. It's not even worth a cent. It was worth less than 1 cent and then shot up to 40 cents. There are reasons why I use January 11 as the start of the next cycle. That's for future videos or previous videos if you guys have followed through there as well. Could this go into 2026 for a green year? Making it the first time in history, there is the possibility that that happens, but there would be huge moves up and down, giving quite severe drawdowns. I alluded to this in videos last week. I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video. Number 2, Bitcoin has never topped in quarter 3. Number 3, Bitcoin has never bottomed in quarter 3. Number 4, July isn't a strong month for important turns. However, when you see a low energy June, sometimes this produces a high energy July. All I look at when it comes to low energy or high energy is essentially the bar ranges. Low energy, it means that you've got an average true range being quite small, and then the high energy is basically some sort of breakout. And we can see that with Bitcoin. We'll drop it down onto the monthlies here on the chart. With May, you had a higher high than the previous tops. We got a new all-time high, and that was a up month. Basically, yes, it was green, but we also had higher highs, higher lows. However, June has been an inside month, lower highs and higher lows. So it's these other months. This one is obviously clearly a down month, and this one here is an outside month. Nonetheless, when we see this sort of short, not much interest in the market, often, not always, but often, this thing can produce bigger results to the upside. You can see it going back throughout history. You've got pretty small months right here. Here's July, and August had a bigger month. September was small. Here's a bigger month. Sometimes towards the end of cycles, you have multiple of these smaller months building up, and then you get a breakout. And like the case was for December 2022, after FTX basically destroyed the entire market at the low there, we had this inside month, and then January took off. So all I'm getting at here is that we got 22 hours to go. If we see what we've seen already, so basically an inside month here, or really just a relatively shallow sort of move over the next 24 hours, that would give us that low interest or say low energy month, and generally we would see some sort of movement out of it. It's basically like a whole lot of energy building up, waiting for this next move, and then you see it explode. And typically around highs, it doesn't really wind up for that long. You can look back here exactly 8 years ago, June 2017. Yes, it went a little bit higher. So that's this month here, but the range of the bar was quite small. So we'd already seen huge volume, huge movement, huge price range. The market broke out of that high convincingly, finally closing above the 2013 top. And then June just took that time to recover again. July, big move to the downside and then all the way back up. It doesn't look like much on the chart now, but living through that looks very similar to what we're living through at the moment. You know, these big sort of moves up, waiting for the next move. Maybe July gives us something like that. Not saying it has to be a huge correction and then a huge move higher again, but generally that energy is building up. This looks like energy building up. Then you get the energy breakout, and then things keep going in the direction of the close of that energy breakout month. So that is my interesting takes for Bitcoin there, those top 5. Number 6, Bitcoin has never had 6 green 6 monthly candles in a bull market. This could be the first time in history, and that could lend its hand to some of these sayings of super cycle and all sorts. This one here is taken from our indicator dashboard. There is a sale on TIA Premium. I'll talk more about that later, and you'll also get a huge discount off the indicator suite, which gives you a lot of different indicators. I'll talk about that later. Anyway, looking at the 6 monthly charts here as we end the first half of 2025, you can see through the previous bull markets. If I give you this range here, 2021, 2019, this one is your bear market year. Then these next 3 years, there is your bear market, and then your next 3 years again. You've got all of this data to look at right there. 5 green 6 months, 1 red. This is your bear market. Cross that out, and then you've got the next one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is a red bear market. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a red. Currently, we've got 5 green 6 month bars. Yes, 5 of them, and they're 6 monthly bars, basically half-year bars. If this market fell 15% in the next 22 hours, that'd give us our red 6 months. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're probably going to be somewhere here. If Bitcoin did somehow fall 15% from its current price, where would that land us? 15% would be all the way down to $91,000, $92,000. So it seems relatively unlikely that we would see a 15% fall in the next 22 hours. The probabilities, obviously, in my opinion, would be on the side that we wouldn't see that, but of course, there's always that chance that we would see it. So that's number 6 for BTC. Bitcoin has never had 6 green, 6 monthly candles in a bull market. However, this is leading into the final peak. Maybe we see something happen in quarter 3 that we hadn't seen before, and that was part of these comments I made here. Bitcoin has never topped or ever bottomed in quarter 3. We've had some interesting turns. We saw the August of 2024 where we had that low for Bitcoin. So chuck this onto the quarterly chart. There is the low for August. Yes, it says July at the bottom, but that you understand what a quarter is. And that's the only time we've really seen any sort of significant turn there for Bitcoin in quarter 3. Going back to the previous bull market, 2021, it got some energy, a move on out of the low of June. So that was interesting, but nothing like a top that you see in quarter 4s. Typically, you got a breakout in quarter 4. You had a top or intermediate top here in quarter 2. You also had another intermediate top here in quarter 2. We had an intermediate top in quarter 1, a new all-time high that is for last year, and then the correction. And again, we saw a new all-time high in quarter 4, 2024, a new all-time high in quarter 1, 2025. So it seems unlikely that we'd see the end in quarter 3. However, that doesn't mean that it can't happen, of course. It's just that the probabilities aren't on the side of that. So that means that it could be even further to go and some things that we haven't seen before. Not to say that this time is different, because that isn't what the saying is about. It's just about following the charts. The saying that this time is different means that you really believe that it's impossible for things to happen and that markets have completely changed, the game's changed, and everyone's going to be rich or everyone's going to be poor forever. That's what the saying of, this time is different, in my opinion, at an extreme case. So let's carry on with some of the interesting insights here. focusing on number 6, just looking at Bitcoin into quarter 3, and then of course the second half before I get into some of the longer term forecasts and a review of those. It was about 14 forecasts that I made for this year. Some of them are working out. Some of them had some pretty severe chops and changes. But first, Bitcoin. At the moment, 22 hours to go, could be the highest monthly close in history. Generally, Bitcoin's come back to break those highs. There is always going to be a case where you get a new all-time high monthly close, and then that's it for a very, very long time. October 2021 was that case. November went higher in price, but closed lower. So the price did go higher, but the end of the month closing price went lower. Again, we saw it in the first run up there for the first half of 2021. New all-time high monthly closing price, new all-time high monthly closing price again and again and again. You get a new all-time high price, but the closing price came underneath. And that's generally a bit of a warning sign that things are about to slow down. You get this new all-time high monthly close, the price goes up the following month, and then you get a lower close in that month. It's not always the end of the world, but it does at least lead to pretty long drawdowns. Look, even in the case of March 2024, new all-time high monthly closing price above all of the previous tops, even not even just above the closing prices, but the price highs. The next month reversed. And if anyone was in the market just over 12 months ago in April, you remember that time there, we gave you some of those signals about the market is slowing down. We got the 3-bar rule where it came down from those highs, and then the market was down for 5 months to the low in August, and then took 8 months to break out to a new all-time high. So the point I'm making here with these new all-time high monthly closing prices are the next month is going to be pretty critical. Next, we're going to take a look at the forecasts and see how well things are doing 6 months later before I dive back into Bitcoin, altcoins, and the stock markets. So this is a post I did in January 2025. Obviously, I was putting it together in December 2024 and then posted it here. Here are the 14 different forecasts I've made. And at the time, things aren't like they are now. That we had new all-time highs, we didn't have any of the tariff collapses, nothing like that. And it's a difficult one to feel at the time because you just don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. You're just following the data, following the charts, following the swings, following the cycles. And we do a lot when it comes to cycle analysis. So firstly, I'll just tick the boxes on some of these, ticks and crosses, and then I'll explain a little more on the cycle. So the top 13 forecasts, and essentially how I'm using them to then go and continue to invest in the markets. When I've got my outlook, that's how I can continue to invest and hopefully continue to make money. Real estate in US, UK, and Oz will finish higher. So far, we've seen new all-time highs. I posted about this on X even just last week. New all-time highs throughout these markets here, US and Australia in particular. UK, slightly different story. But this cycle, this 18-year cycle, is based on US data. So US real estate and the economic data. Things are still going up. And we've seen those new all-time high national average prices. Some cities are going to be down. That's a given. We see it in Australia too. But across the board, national average speaking, you got higher prices. So it's happened. US interest rates will rise in the second half. That was pretty much one of the main comments that people disagreed with. That's okay. It wasn't anything harsh. And essentially, we have barely seen the US interest rates get cut. And I'm talking about potential interest rate rises later in 25 or even probably at this stage, 2026. That was unheard of back then and probably even unheard of at the beginning of the year as well, if I can remember correctly. And yeah, people disagreed there, but now we're starting to see why that's the case with the yields and the bonds and things that are beginning to break there. SPX will close higher. Well, this was before the tariff collapse, 6,700 points. That might even still be a possibility with the SPX going to new all-time highs, 6,200 points. Remember, this was January 2025. So this was 6 months ago, just a few days off 6 months ago. NDX will close higher, 25,000 points. Man, I've got some big targets out here. DJI will close higher, 47,000 points. SPX, NDI, and DJI won't trade below their August 2024 low. That was wrong. There's the August low there at 5,100. It spiked under And then, as you can see now, for this 6-month bar, the quarterly bar, things blew up and closed even higher. This is the largest bars in history for the stock market. All the way back, the largest quarterly bar, the largest 6-month bars, some huge, huge results after it broke that August low, but then bounced very, very strongly above that low. So yeah, I said it wouldn't trade below. It did. Stops get hit, but I'm still looking at higher prices. So it's crazy how things can happen like that. SPX, NASDAQ, Dow Jones will close higher, but not without a significant correction in 2025. And I was expecting 8 to 12%. And the correction that actually occurred, I believe, was close to around 20%. So it was from the top in Feb down to the low, we got 21%. So a 12% is a very big correction for the market. In this case, we got a 21% correction. So look, I was looking for a very significant, and I labeled that it would be significant, double digit. It was actually a lot more. Commodities, in particular energies, will close higher. We've just seen oil spike, still waiting on the rest of the energies. Gold, silver are up. Copper is up. Bitcoin won't trade below 66. Hasn't happened yet. No monthly close below 74, but we touched 75. Bitcoin will hit at least 122 in 2025, possibly 144. Let's start with 122. That was another comment from people that said, oh, you're not going out very far here. Bitcoin would easily break above that at 122. So this was at the end of December. So, it was trading around 96, but I didn't think we were just about to blow up and just keep running to 300, 400, 500,000. There had to be something in the middle. I didn't know what it would be. Obviously, there's the tariff that crashed a lot of the markets, and now it's rebounded from that point. It still hasn't hit 122, and there's really not that much interest in the market at the moment. However, things are climbing. To get to that 122 price target there, we're just about 12% short. So it seems like it is possible, but it's got to get above this significant 8-year resistance line. ETH will outperform Bitcoin. That one there I got wrong in 2024. Maybe I'll get it wrong again in this year. So ETH has really been the worst performer out of all of these forecasts that I've made. ETH Bitcoin will close the year higher. And then ETH BTC will not break 0.09. Now we can start to see that's probably almost impossible for ETH to get back above the Bitcoin value that it had in 2021. Bonus prediction, and then I'll get on to more of the charts and then Bitcoin forecasts. I believe we will hear from more people, media, investors, analysts, etc., begin to believe that markets, including but not limited to the US economy, stock markets, real estate, can't go down because this time is different. So I haven't heard that yet, but I think this narrative is building. And I guess the reason why I bring this up again, to remind myself, maybe to remind you if you've been following along this whole time by subscribing, 3 out of 10 of you, then this AI narrative, I think, is potentially building even stronger. And I think that is going to relate to this time is different as we begin to see the blow off top for the stock markets. I think house prices, the economy, we're rounding this area. Remember, this was 6 months ago. I think we're more probably somewhere up around here. And I think we're beginning to round some sort of top. And then over the coming years for the US real estate and economy will begin to come down. But as these come down, as the US housing market, land really starts to come down, the majority of people won't factor this in because they'll see their stocks going up, especially if it's something to do with AI, maybe even if crypto and Bitcoin start to get into the headlines a bit more and capture the imaginations of the gamblers, the traders, of course. January 2025. I posted about this before. You can check that post out. Here are the ones from 2024. Basically, all of these were spot on, except damn ETH. And then I did one for 2023. That was at a time when everyone was looking for a major recession. Didn't happen, and then markets continued higher. Enough on the remembering the past, but of course that's the idea. Study the past to forecast the future. Let's have a look at the future here as we remember the past. This is for the S&P 500. New all-time high price, new all-time high weekly close, probably a new all-time high monthly close. If the S&P dropped by about 2.5%, that would be the lower monthly close. But I think it's unlikely that the S&P 500 is going to close that much lower today, especially as it's just broken out into new fresh highs. S&P 500 2025, Q2 largest quarterly range in history, and then the first half largest 6-month range in history. So now let's have a look at some of the price targets above. as we head towards the 50% resistance on the price extension. This one here is the entire range that you see here from the bear market low to the top in January off the very significant April tariff crash low. So 50% is dead on 6,163 points. The numbers to the upside here, I'm looking around 7,500 points for an extension. NASDAQ longest 6-month green streak is 12, then 8, and currently it's at 5. Unlikely this is going to be red, so let's run with this being green. And you can see back at any of these counts here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Should we run into something like we've seen just before the peak in 2021, we've still got at least another 6 months to go here. So there is the chance that we can run between 6 and 8 6-monthly bars in a row here in green. And if things got absolutely crazy like the dot-com bubble, there it is there. That's your 6 years in a row, so 12 6-monthly bars. And finally on the TradFi, before I get over to the Bitcoins and cryptos again, is our end of cycle forecast when it comes to the US dollar. So that's it right here. As we run into the second half of the cycle, this is where the dollar begins to collapse. And the dollar has started its collapse from the second half of 2022. So basically coming into 3 years now of essentially a downtrend on a macro scale. Yeah, we had a year of it going up, but this last 6 months has been absolutely shocking for the US dollar, down nearly 11% in that 6-month period, now below all of these highs, and most likely going to close underneath many of these previous tops. So why is this important? Why are we talking about the US dollar? Lots of things that I talk about. Well, this one here, typically at the end of the cycle falls. US dollar typically falls in the second half of the real estate cycle. If this is all new to you, obviously stick around on the channel, or if you're more serious about your trading investing, I suggest checking out TIA Premium while the sale is on today. You got about 12 hours to go. Link to this is in the video description. Plenty of content there to help you sort out your end of cycle or peak of the cycle analysis and plans before I think there is a coming major collapse and recession, but you can also profit from that as well. So the dollar peaks and then comes down in the second half of the cycle. It's happened this cycle. It's happening this cycle. It happened to the 2000s, and it also happened in the 80s leading into the 90s recession. So we potentially have further to go here for the US dollar. And that, of course, could be at least short-term good news for other assets, risk assets like altcoins, Bitcoin, some stocks, of course. So total crypto market cap, let's start here. There are still some positive signs on the longer term here. I'm on the monthly chart now for the total crypto market cap, excluding Bitcoin and ETH, but including the stable coins. It's at 837 billion. If 22 hours left, we can hold above 800 billion. This would still be in a relatively okay position because it hasn't broken down from 700 billion. So that's the 50% level here. Hasn't broken down or closed there. And we would be sitting at a relatively okay sort of close here for the altcoin market. Ideally, over the next couple of months, it starts to regain a lot of strength, more of that liquidity from the stable coins, and it breaks above $960 billion before it can keep going. So it's in an okay position. There's still a little bit of hopium here left for stronger altcoins. And with that said, before I get to the Bitcoin price targets, we look at the USDT dominance, which this week has had a very good bar for the bulls for Bitcoin and crypto. Weekly bearish engulfing. We saw this huge week up 2 weeks ago, and then this week that just occurred, all the way back down, engulfed the entire candle, closed underneath the 50% level, and all we have left is this next 50%. I say all, but there's also 4.4% at the lows here when Bitcoin hit its previous all-time high. So at this low at 4.4% on the dominance, that is the level to beat. And I've said many times before, I'm waiting for this to happen, and then I think we'd start to see a little bit more money flow out into cryptos. Anywhere down to this level, I think Bitcoin's going to take a lot more of the cake, or at least be in the spotlight. Yes, ETH is going to get some of the other altcoins are going to get it as well, but I think they're going to get even more if the USDT dominance can get into this zone. And then it's going to be on for young and old, and every single altcoin influencer that has been talking about buying altcoins through this entire period is going to come out of the woodworks if it breaks 3.7%. So if this begins to happen, this 3.7%, you watch the absolute degeneracy go absolutely wild. Meantime, we can have a look at our Bitcoin, not get too carried away with what's going on in the world, and have a look at the biggest one here in the short term. So yes, this is my 6-month outlook. Let's see if this analysis continues to unfold over the coming 6 months. In the short term, we got our overbalance in time and price to the upside. Corrections will occur, but this is one of the strong signals that we discuss about trend changes. And you can find this in the masterclasses right down here for members. And if you are looking to get into TIA Premium, I suggest checking out overbalance in time and price. Sale is on for the next 12 hours. Great signs there for Bitcoin. Pretty decent signs here in the short term for the USDT dominance. And we can't finish the video without the Bitcoin price targets. Now we're looking at extensions of the current bull market ranges. The reason why these are still on the charts and I'm still using them is because they have continued to show signs that they are working. And the previous time that this worked was basically looking at an exact 100% repeat of the prior price range. So this is the price range from this cycle low to the March top, projected off the extreme points here of the macro move. August low, ran up, hit dead on 100%. Now I'm looking out towards at least the first targets around the 120, but more importantly, around this 130 level is where things get pretty congested. So that was also the next swing up. And then for the shorter term, the most recent swing on the weekly chart. So we got two macro price ranges here, and then a short term as well, looking out towards the mid 130s. Price can get there, fantastic. I'd be looking for some sort of pause. Otherwise, if it does slice through, that is a strong sign. One sign, if it stops, pauses, just means we're looking for a healthy correction before a continuation. Otherwise, if it slices through, then I'm looking towards the 150 to mid 160s, that is. And those are pretty decent extensions of the prior price ranges. That comes out at, like I said, the mid 160s. Two of the targets are around 164, 166. So average it out, give yourself around 165. Lots of work to do before we get there. Oh, and really interesting thing here, which leads back to a video that I did last week. I'll leave a link to the videos from last week at the end of this one. Looking at the price running up here into the 160s, look at where this could correct to. So say we get to the mid 160s, there's 165. This could correct back down to where we are and still only be a 30 to 35% correction. If that did that, that would send, I think, shockwaves through all the Bitcoin and cryptos, potentially saying this cycle's over, game over. It could be by that, in that case. But really, if it did get to the 160s and then corrected back to these previous highs, you're still only looking at about a 30% correction, which it has done here and here. So it's done it twice already. Something I'm thinking about if we get to those price targets and these longer term bullish momentum continues on with the market. Like, subscribe. I'll follow this up in the next quarter and the end of the year for the next year's forecasts, where I look forward to 2026 and basically the peak of the real estate and economic cycle coming in. I'll see you guys back here at the next video. Don't forget, the sale is on for the next 12 hours. Link in the top of the video description. You'll get the email and you'll get the discount codes there. Thanks again, guys. See you at the next one.